subfolder named first. So I want to have a look at this subfolder where I have two text files, 2015 data and 2016 data. So I want to open one of these files. These are text files that will open in Notepad. You don't need to do that, just watch it on screen. This is the 2015 data that I just opened, and it has a date column, a sales rep, a product, and a revenue. The 2016 file is the same with different numbers, date column, sales rep, product, and revenue. My goal is to combine the two text files, 2015 and 2016. But the problem I have, each one of the text files includes over 600,000 records. When I combine them together, that will come out to 1.2 million records approximately. And Excel cannot accommodate this number of records. I want to combine the 2015 and the 2016 data, and I'm going to do that in Power Query. When I do it in Power Query can accommodate this number of records. It's not a problem. But can I send the data back to Excel? Excel will crash right away. Then when I fix the data in Power Query and combine the two text files, I need to send my data somewhere that can accommodate this huge number of records. What is this somewhere? This somewhere is Power Pivot, the data model. My project consists of two parts. Part number one, combining these two text files. And then part number two, if I go to 01Nabil1468, and this is the Excel file that I was using, I just reopened it. I have in one of the sheets Power Pivot data model. And in this worksheet, I have a small list which consists of manager and region. Just to remind you, here is the text file, one of the text files that I'll be combining. When I combine these two text files, I want to calculate the total revenue for each region. The manager column in the Excel list matches the sales rep in the text file. And because I'll be combining 2015 and 2016 in Power Query and send them to the data model Power Pivot, I'll be also converting this list into a table and send it side by side with the combined text files into Power Pivot. I create relationships, and accordingly I can calculate the total revenue for each region. Are you ready? I start by creating a very special type of query that looks inside that folder. So, on the Data tab, and I'm in the Excel file that we were using in the previous session. I go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and in the Get and Transform group, I have Get Data from File, from Folder. Get Data from File, from Folder. I select from Folder, and I want to navigate to the folder where I have the two text files. It's on the desktop, Power Query, 01Nabil1468, and I select the folder named first. I hit open. And this navigator window shows me the contents of the folder, 2015 data and 2016 data. And because I want to combine these two text files, I'm going to take them to the query editor by clicking on Transform Data. I click on Transform Data. That opens the query editor. I see the contents of the folder, 2015 and 2016 data, and I'm going to perform some steps in Power Query. Are you able to follow along? In the query editor, I want to give a nice name to my query. So under Applied Steps, I'm going to name it Final Sales. What I want to do is to keep only the file, the binary file, the content column, and I want to get rid of all the other columns. So I right-click the content column and select Remove Other Columns. A step has been added to the Applied Steps. And now I want to combine the two text files. And we have a special tool for doing this. If you hover over the button in the upper right corner, having the double down pointing arrow, it reads Combine Files. This button combines only text files. So if I give it a click, it will open a dialog box, the Combine Files dialog box. And it gives me a preview of the combined files, just few records. And I already noticed a problem. I have a date column, and then because the label sales rep consists of two words, it thinks that sales is one column and rep is another column, so it puts the first name under sales and the last name under rep. Then I have the product and revenue. I want to fix this problem by changing the delimiter. So if I click on the down arrow for the delimiter, and instead of the custom delimiter, I select a tab, that fixed the problem. I have a date, a sales rep, a product, and a revenue. And that looks fine. Let's hit OK. Now I combined the two text files. I have over 1 million records. And here are the steps under Applied Steps. We need to review the column headers and review the data types. Date, that's fine. Sales rep, I have a preference to changing the column header to manager. So I type manager, then product, then revenue, that's fine. What about the data type? Here I have a date data type for date, which is fine. ABC means text for manager, ABC for product, that's fine. But for the revenue, I want a monetary data type. Then I click on the data type icon and I select currency. And now I finished cleaning and transforming and combining my files. The question I have for you: can I send this data back to Excel? I need an answer. Excel cannot accommodate the number of records that I have after combining the two text files. And if I do, Excel will crash right away. So where can I send it? Where can I send this data after fixing it? The only place that can accommodate this huge size of data is Power Pivot, the data model. And accordingly, I'm not going to click on the upper part of this button because it doesn't give me an option. The upper part sends my data back to Excel in a new worksheet, which is not what I want. Then I click on the down pointing arrow and I select Close and Load To. I select Close and Load To. Where do you want to send this data? I only want to create a connection, so I select Only Create a Connection, and I check the box, Add this data to the data model. Only create a connection means keep the source files in their original folder and just point to them, create a connection to them. And when you combine them, the result of combining the two text files will be sent to the data model. Please hit OK. The Queries and Connections pane opens, and I can see the final sales query is processing all the records in the source folder, and I end up by having 1.168 million records. Do you have the same number? Wonderful. Back to Excel, I have a table which shows managers and regions. And because my goal is to calculate the revenue for each region, then I need to send this list to Power Pivot, the data model. But in order to send it to Power Pivot, I have to convert it into a table. And we learned the shortcut Control L, followed by hitting Enter. I converted my list into a table, and I want to give it a nice name. So I'll name it Manager Regions. I named my table Manager Region. How can I send this table to the data model? How can I send this table to the data model? Power Pivot, add to data model. Linda, that's wonderful. The Power Pivot tab, that's correct. Just it. Let's go to the Power Pivot tab and click on Add to Data Model. And look at this beautiful surprise. I'm in the data model. And this is the manager regions table coming from Excel. But here is the final sales table with 1.168 million record coming from combining the two files available in the first folder, the two text files. In the final sales query, I have the revenue. And in the manager by region, I have the manager and region. How in the world can I calculate the total revenue for each region? What do I need to do at this point? What do I need to do to calculate for each region the total revenue? Excellent. Excellent. Excellent, Linda and Justin. Thank you very much. To create relationships, I go to diagram view. And that's why, if you remember, when combining the file that used to be named sales rep, and I had a preference to naming it manager just to create the logic of what we are doing. It's not necessarily for the functionality. Creating a relationship is a matter of drag and drop. I drag managers over manager, and I would have created the relationship. But my goal is to get the revenue for each region. Very easy. Click on Pivot Table. I want to create my pivot table in a new worksheet. And for my pivot table, from the Manager Regions table, I drag the region to the rows. I get a unique list of regions. And then from the final sales query, I drag the revenue to the values. Et voila. This is the revenue for each one of the region. As a result of combining two text files and creating a relationship in the data model with an Excel table, the total sales are 36 billion. I can click on Queries and Connections, and this is the number of records I have coming from combining the two text files. Now, look at the real magic. Oh, yes, I understand. You are right. Because I closed the file and reopened it. I didn't save the improper data. What you have is correct. Can you repeat that? I don't see the revenue in the pivot table field. Did you create the relationships? Let's go back. I'm going to close. And then I go back to the data model. Did you create this relationship? Eric? So you connected managers to manager, then click on pivot table and create the pivot table in a new worksheet. The revenue is here in the final sales. The region is in the manager region. So if I go to Excel and I click on the pivot table field list, revenue comes from final sales. Region comes from manager regions. Oh, if you didn't change the name to from revenue to from amount to revenue, then you have amount. It's the same exact thing. That's brilliant, Linda.
That was extremely close, sir.
Okay.
Oh.
That's not all the magic. Look at this. I'm going to open the queries and connections. So I go to the data tab, click on queries and connections. How many records? 1.168 million records. What's the total sales? 36 billion. Look at this. I open File Explorer, and here is the first folder having the 2015 and 2016 data. What happens if I add the sales for 2017 and I have them here outside the folder? I can drag them and drop them inside the folder. Now the first folder has 3 years sales. 2017 has been added. Do I need to repeat the steps? Just refresh the query. On the data tab, I click on refresh on. Keep an eye on this number, final sales. Keep an eye on this number, 36 billion. I added the 2017 data and I'm refreshing the query. Power Query will process all the steps under applied steps. And now I have 1.6 million record. I click on continue. I go back and look at this. The total revenue is 51 billion. That's the magic of Power Query. Do you have any questions? We have so many tools in Power Query. And in the next exercise, I just want to explore some tools. And to do that, I'm going to create an activity that just enables me to deal with the hidden part of these tools. So let's close this Excel file. And from the Power Query folder, let's open month calendar, start. Please open month calendar, start. Did you find the file? So let me explain the work situation, and I'm not explaining the Excel portion. I just want to explore the Power Query portion. I created 3 drop lists in A3, B3, and C3. A3 has a drop list from 1 to 31. So I can select any day in the month. B3 has a drop list from 1 to 12, so I can select any month. And then C3 has a drop list from which I can select a year, and I have 100 years in this drop list. When I select any month, any day, any month, any year, I have a function, a date function in cell E3 that builds the date. The date function has 3 arguments. It requires a year, a month, and a day. And when you select them, it will pick them up and it will build the date. I converted this single cell into a table. So you can see the table design tab. And I can give it a name, my date. And I hit enter. Whenever you select any day, any month, any year, I want to be able to build instantly a month calendar corresponding to the selected date. So the month calendar will appear here. And I'll be using Power Query to do that. I also have a label in cell G2, which uses a text function, and the text function returns the full name of the month and the year. I want to create a query using this table, having one single cell to build an entire calendar in a way that if I select a different day, a different month, a different year, my calendar updates on the fly. Are you ready? To be on the same track, don't change the date. We'll change it later on. So we need to have the same date so that you are able to see the steps exactly as I create them. That's one thing. The other thing is, this specific date is an important date in human history. Do you know why? You don't know why. Because it's my birthday. Okay. Okay. Now let's go. Select a single cell, and my table consists of one single cell. And then I go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and I click on From Table Range. When I click on From Table Range, Excel will take this table to Power Query, and the query editor opens on top of Excel. Before making any change, and because I intend to build a calendar and send it back to Excel, I want to change the name of the query to calendar. If you remember, the date in Excel doesn't look like this, because when I sent this single cell table into Power Query, Power Query tried to be nice to me by adding this tab, interpreting it as a date and time data type. Look at the icon, it has a little clock, and that's not correct. Thank you, Power Query. I don't need your help. I deleted the change type by clicking on the deletion symbol. And now I want to fix the data type in this single cell. So I click on the data type and I change it to date. In order to build my calendar, I'm going to use a special Power Query function. And like any function in Excel, it requires some arguments. And the arguments that this function will require to build the entire calendar: what's the start date of the month, which means the first day of the month, and how many days do you have in this month? So I'm going to extract this information using some Power Query tools. What's the start date of the month? And how many days do you have in this month? And of course, if you select a different date, then the result of these two questions will be different. With the date column selected, I want to find out the start date of the month. I click on Add Column, and to the right side of the Add column I have a date command. Hover over month, and then select Start of Month. So this is the first day of the selected date. That's one of the arguments I will need to build the calendar. Go back to the date column. And the second question is, how many days do you have in this month? Still on the Add Column tab. Click on the down arrow for date. Hover over month and select days in month. These are the two arguments that I need for building my entire calendar. Start of month, days in month. And to build my entire calendar, I'm going to use a Power Query function in a separate column. On the Add Column tab, click on Custom Column. A dialog box opens. I want to give a name to the new column. Let it be full month. And the function I'll be using for building my calendar is called list.dates. Power Query has a rich function language. It has hundreds of functions. The function I'll be using is called list.dates. Remember that all Power Query functions are case sensitive, so you need to capitalize the first letter of each word. I click in the box where I create my formula, and I type list capital L dot dates capital D. List dot dates, and I open bracket. Like in Excel, I get the help of the IntelliSense list. I knew that already. It asked me, what's the start date of the month? Well, this is what I prepared for, start of month. So just double click on start of month to put it inside the formula. I then type a comma to move to the next argument. And the next argument, how many days do you have in this month? And I also prepared for that, days in month. Double click on days in month. And this function is going to build a list of all the days of the month, starting from the start of month. And it will include how many days? Days in month. But how would you like to move from one number to the next number, what will be the step? So I type a comma, and now the last argument, in which I tell Power Query that I want to proceed 1 day at a time. And I have to type it in a very special way. I type a number sign, and then I type duration in lowercase, and I open bracket. Number sign, duration, and I open bracket. In brackets, I'll be typing 1, 0, 0, 0, and I close the bracket. What does it mean? I want a step of 1 day, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, 1, 0, 0, 0, and I close the bracket for the duration. Then I close the bracket for the list, dot dates. A green check mark in the lower left corner means I don't have issues with my calculation. I hit OK. And what do I get? The function is named list.dates, then it returns a list of all the dates. I want to expand my list. Then I click on the double side pointing arrow. And this is the first time we see this type of errors. Click on the double side pointing arrow and select the first option, expand to new rows. And I get a full list of the days of the single date coming from Excel. It doesn't look at all like a calendar. Now we want to make it look like a calendar. In a calendar, in the body of the calendar, we see the number. In the body of the calendar, we see the day as a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I want to extract this number in a separate column. With the full month column selected, I go to Add Column. I click on the down arrow for date. I go down to day. And I select day. And I get a list. This will be the body of the calendar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what do we see in the top row of the calendar? We see the name of the day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. So I go back to full month. On the Add Column tab, I click on the down arrow for date, hover over day, and I select name of day. So I get the name of the day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever. That will be the top row of my final calendar. But in the top row of a real calendar, we don't see the full name of the day. We see it abbreviated. Friday will appear as FRI, Sunday will appear SUN. So I want to change the day name to the abbreviated day name. So I click on day name. I go to the Transform tab, and I want to extract the first 3 characters. So I click on Extract. First characters. How many characters do you want? I want 3 characters. Then I type 3. And I hit OK. This will be the top row of my calendar, and the day will be the body of my calendar. But in a calendar, I have 1 week per row, and then we move to the next row for the next week, and then another row for the next week, and so on. So in order to break this calendar into weeks, I need to add another column where I have an incremental number which increments at the beginning of each week. So I select full month. I go to Add Column. I click on the down arrow for date. I select week. And then I select week of month. Here is the new column that has been added. I have 1, 1, 1, and at the beginning of the week, Sunday, it increments to 2. It keeps repeating the same number, and at the next Sunday, it increments to 3, and so on. I just want to keep these 3 columns and get rid of the other columns. I select day. I press Shift and click on week of month. I then right-click and remove other columns. Then all what remains is the day column. That's the body of the calendar. The day name, that's the top row of my calendar. The week of month, the incremental number that will break my calendar into rows. Select day name, press Shift and click on week of month. And I want to create a functionality that simulates a pivot table. With the 2 columns selected, I click on the Transform tab and then click on Pivot column. Let's read what it says. Use the names in the column day name to create new columns. That means column header. That's wonderful. And then for the body of the pivot table, it says use week of month. No, that's incorrect. So I expand And I say, I want this column in the body of the calendar, in the values of the pivot table. And I select day. When you select a number and drag it to the values area in a regular pivot table, what happens? It creates a sum function. But this is a calendar. I don't want to sum the numbers for Wednesday and sum the numbers for Tuesday and so on. Then I click on Advanced Options, and instead of the sum function, I want to change it and say, don't aggregate. With my next click, I will make it look like a calendar. Please hit OK. Then I have the weekdays at the top, the day names. This is the body of the calendar, but I need to fine-tune it a little bit. The week of month is not needed anymore, so I want to remove it. Right-click and remove. And I want my calendar to start on a Sunday. Then I click on Sunday, move with my horizontal scroll bar, press Shift and click on Wednesday. And then right-click, hover over Move, and select to beginning. Then my week starts on a Sunday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. All the steps that I performed are being recorded under Applied Steps, which means if you change your selection from one of the drop lists or the three of them, you will be creating a new date. And Power Query will process all these steps for the new date, and it will return a calendar corresponding to that date. Where do you want to dump this calendar? I want to send it in the existing worksheet. And I click on the Home tab, click on the down arrow for Close and Load, select Close and Load to. I want to send it as a table in the existing worksheet. I click on Existing, and then I select G2 under my label. When I hit OK, then I get the calendar that I'm looking for. Who was able to follow along and create this beautiful calendar? Amazing. You are the best. Okay. When I create a calendar, and this calendar is coming from Power Query, I want to improve the appearance of my calendar and then test it. So when I click inside the calendar, and because it's a table, I go to the Table Design tab, take the Check Away from Filter button. I don't want these filters, so I take the Check Away from Filter button. The shortcut is Ctrl-Shift-L. And I also want to expand the columns a little bit. I expanded the columns. And now I'm ready to test with a different combination of day, month, and year. I can close the queries and connections. And I'm going to change the year. Let's make it, let's say, 2005. And I'll be selecting the month of May. And I want to use the 16th of May. nothing changes in my calendar. What do you need to do? I need to refresh to process all the steps of this query. But when I refresh, something will happen here. The width of the column will change. I go to the Data tab and click on Refresh All. And this is May 2005. But as you can see, the width of the columns changed. I don't want, when I refresh my calendar, I don't want the width of the columns to change. Then I'm going to add a little functionality to this. I'm going to change a property. Adjust the width of the column one more time. And before refreshing the query, I go to the Table Design tab, and I want to change the property that changes the column width. So I click on Properties and take the check away from Adjust Column Width and hit OK. If you change the date one more time and refresh the query, the width of the column is not going to change. So let's say I select August and I select 2009, and let's say I select the 23rd and I want to refresh. I can refresh by clicking on the refresh button or use the shortcut Ctrl-Alt-F5. Ctrl-Alt-F5. My query refreshes. I have August 2009 and the width of the column doesn't change. The final thing that I'm not going to explain in this course, how in the world can I have the query refresh automatically whenever I change my selection from any one of the drop lists without having to click on the refresh button or even use the shortcut Ctrl-Alt-F5. One more thing to make it really useful, I want the day in the selected month to be highlighted in my calendar with conditional formatting. These extra steps are included in the full tutorial in which I explain everything I have done in this exercise. Would you like to get the link for this tutorial? So I go back to my YouTube channel. And the tutorial I'm talking about is this one. I get a list of 50 years.
Before we were using Monday.com, our team was rounding work. Our days used to split between work.
Hello everyone, I am Nabil Murad. In this project I want to show you how to create a month calendar for any month in any year. So we can build a date by selecting a day, a month and a year. I have 3 drop lists. So if I select a date, let's say the 16th of June, and then I select the year 2011. Automatically the calendar has been generated, the date has been built, and I have a dynamic label. If I change the date, the month, the year, everything updates on the fly. As you can see, everything updates without the need of hitting refresh or using a shortcut. By watching this tutorial, you will learn how to do that, and you will learn about conditional formatting as well. So I'm copying the link for this tutorial and I'll put it in the chat window. So today we talked about Power Pivot, we talked about Power Query, and if you are not yet impressed by what we can do with Power Query, what I'm going to show you next, tomorrow, in the first session, is just unbelievable, stunning, mind-blowing. So stay tuned. Have a great evening, everyone, and see you tomorrow. Linda, you have a question. I missed where to update the properties so the table doesn't resize. Well, to do that, where did I do it? Maybe here? I don't know. If you click inside the calendar, go to the Table Design tab, click on Properties, Table Design tab, yeah, here it is. You go to the Table Design tab, you click on Properties, and you take the check away from Adjust Column Width. Anyway, everything is explained with annotation in my video tutorial. Any questions? No questions? Thank you very much and see you.